everyone, I hope you're all well. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Malin and it's time for another video. Today I'm going to make a spicy, sour, coconutty noodle soup. The flavors are definitely loosely inspired by Thai cuisine, but definitely not traditional as far as I know. I've sort of mixed things together that I think taste good, and this is what I've come up with. The soup has broccoli and mixed mushrooms in it, but you could definitely swap the veggies out if you have other veggies on hand. And I'm also making some crispy tofu to top it all off with, and I'm using rice noodles, but again you could use, for example, sweet potato noodles or something like that if you prefer, or if that's what you have at home. But yeah, let's get started and make the tofu first. I'm using firm tofu that I squeeze out the excess liquid out of, and then I place it into a clean tea towel and I press it with my hand so that I soak up more of the excess water. Once my block is more or less dry, I cut it into bite-sized chunks before I dry those off as well with the tea towel, and I do this to get rid of as much moisture as possible without actually pressing the tofu, and this just helps it bake quicker in the oven. I transfer my dried off chunks into a bowl and I add a little bit of rapeseed oil as well as some soy sauce and a pinch of salt, and then I toss to coat. I'm also sprinkling in some cornstarch, which helps give that crispy outer layer when we bake the tofu. So I toss that to coat the cubes again, and then I place my cubes onto a lined baking tray and I bake it in the oven for about half an hour. So now that I've put the tofu in the oven, that's going to take care of itself pretty much. I just need to flip it after about 20 minutes and then let it bake for another 10 minutes. So I've got plenty of time to get started with the veggies and sort of the brothy part of the soup. And what I like to do first is prep all my veggies and the aromatics. It just makes cooking much more easy. And I also like to flash stir fry my mushrooms and broccoli and then set them aside while I make the broth. But you could totally make the broth first and then just cook the veggies in the broth if you prefer. But I do it my way and you do it any which way you like. I start by preparing the aromatics, so I grab 2 red chilies, and mine are pretty mild, so I chop up the whole chili including the seeds. But depending on how spicy your chili is, you might want to remove the seeds and maybe even just use 1 chili. I'm also going to grate some fresh ginger, but first I remove the skin using a spoon. Then I just grate it on a box grater and add it into my little bowl with the chili. Of course, I'm also preparing some garlic, so I grab a few cloves, I peel them, and then I just squeeze them into my bowl along with the other aromatics. And I just use a garlic press for this, but you could of course chop them if you want to. Next up, I'm chopping up a brown onion finely, and I set that aside as well while I prepare the veggies for the soup. I'm using broccoli and mushrooms for this soup, and for the broccoli I just cut the stem off and then I break it into florets. I cut those florets into smaller pieces, and then I also remove the hard outer layer on the stem as well before I chop that into bite-sized pieces also. I set the broccoli aside and get to prepping my mushrooms, and I'm using a mix of mushrooms here. You can use a mix that you like, but I'm using shiitake, portobello, some oyster mushrooms, and some shimei mushrooms. And I start by prepping the shiitake. I cut off the hard stem and then I slice it up. For the portobello, I just cut off a little bit of the stem and then I halve the mushroom before I slice it up. For the shimei mushrooms, I'm just cutting off the bottom part which holds the mushrooms together, and then I just separate them. And it's the same for the oyster mushrooms, but with the bigger ones I like to just tear them in 2 or 3 pieces depending on the size. Once the mushrooms are all prepped, I'm ready to start cooking, and first I'm going to just stir fry the veggies. So I do that in a little bit of oil just for a few minutes until the mushrooms soften a little bit and the broccoli starts cooking. I season this with salt as I cook it, and once they are looking a little bit softened, I remove them from the heat and set them aside while I make the broth. For my broth, I start off with a little bit of rapeseed oil to saute my onions in, and I like to season them with a little bit of salt. Then I saute them until they're translucent. Next, I add in my aromatics, so that's the chili, ginger, and garlic, and I saute this for another minute or 2, just until it's really fragrant. To add even more depth of flavor, I add in some ground coriander, and I saute that for about 30 seconds until fragrant yet again. Then I add in some tomato paste. I'm also going to add in some peanut butter, and this might seem a little strange, but it actually adds such a nice flavor and a really yummy creaminess to the soup. I give this all a good mix and cook it off for a couple of minutes just to get rid of that raw tomato flavor. Then I grab a can of coconut milk that will add even more of a creamy flavor to this broth. I pour it in with the other ingredients, and then I also pour in some water. This makes the base of the soup, and I give this a little bit of a mix, and then I add in a stock cube as well. If you had vegetable broth, you could do that instead of the water and the stock cube. I like to use a whisk to combine everything, and then I add in some soy sauce to deepen the savory flavor. Then I give it a good mix and bring it to a boil and let it simmer for a couple of minutes to bring all the flavors together. It's time to add the veggies into the broth to allow them to cook through, and this will only take a few minutes, so keep an eye on them. While I let my veggies simmer for a few minutes, I'm going to prepare my rice noodles, and I'm just going to cook them according to package instructions. And I have thin rice noodles that cook in about 2 minutes in boiling water. But if you have rice noodles or any type of noodle that needs soaking, you probably want to do that before you start cooking the soup. But I'm just going to get mine on, and then we're pretty much ready to serve. I pop my rice noodles into 2 bowls, and then I finish off the soup with a little bit of toasted sesame oil and some lime. The lime really brings such a nice zest to the soup and also lifts all the other flavors, so don't skip it. I ladle my soup into my bowl with noodles, and I top it all off with those crispy tofu cubes. Finally, I get some garnishes out. I add some fresh coriander, some toasted sesame seeds, and some fresh chilies on top for a pop of red. You can feel free to leave the garnishes out or add even more, just be creative, but I'd say that the coriander really brings it a really lovely herby flavor. So that was my noodle soup offering to you guys today. I hope you enjoyed it. It's definitely perfect for this time of year, at least here in the northern hemisphere, when it's still a little bit chilly, and I definitely enjoy some warming food, a little bit of spice, and in my book you can't go wrong with noodles. I hope you feel the same way. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. Bye.